Breaking news. New satellite images apparently show that North Korea has begun rebuilding key missile facilities. And this, of course, is taking place after talks collapsed between President Trump and Kim Jong-un. So what is North Korea up to here? Joining me now is Republican Senator Mike Rounds. He serves on the Armed Services Committee. Senator Rounds, great to have you on New Day. We saw these pictures overnight for the very first time of activity at a North Korean missile site. Does that concern you?
It does. It doesn't surprise us, but most certainly you would think that there'd be a reaction once these talks broke down. I think the president was correct to walk away if he didn't feel that we were getting a good deal. But when that occurs, then North Korea is going to do something. It does not surprise us to see that they would, and that they clearly understand that we can see what they're doing. So it may be as much a part of messaging as it is anything else.
What message do you think North Korea is trying to send?
They're trying to send a message that they're for real and that they expect that if we're not going to capitulate to some of their demands and continue to negotiate, that they're going to continue on with their nuclear development programs, including the development of the types of delivery systems that we have in the past been able to stop them from achieving.
When he walked
which includes
away,
ICBMs.
When he walked away from this summit, President Trump said that North Korea had agreed to no new missile testing and no new nuclear testing, despite the fact that the talks broke down. Well, missile development, maybe not actually firing a rocket, but shouldn't that be of concern? Should that perhaps be a reason why President Trump should take a harsher tone with Kim Jong-un?
Well, I think he does in the private ones. I think sometimes publicly he may appear to be soft. But I don't think behind the scenes he's necessarily soft. I think that's one of the things that's evidenced by the fact that he walked away from these talks. Most certainly North Korea is a threat. They continue to be a threat. We keep our eye on them. We identify them as one of the four major challengers in the world today. We have China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea. North Korea keeps our attention, and most certainly, look, this is an individual who clearly needs the attention of the world. He wants more attention, and he wants to be recognized as a world power. They want regime continuation, and the way that they want regime continuation is to carry a nuclear weapon that is a threat
I
to
will
other
note,
countries.
you said that North Korea is a threat. The president, after Singapore, tweeted that North Korea is no longer a nuclear threat. You believe that the president's wrong there and North Korea is a threat?
I would disagree with that assessment that they are not a threat. I think they are a threat.
Okay.
And I think that I think their original intentions and their offer that they would be moving forward with negotiations to denuclearize was a step in the right direction. Doesn't mean that this has all come to a complete standstill, but most certainly this is not something that we can look beyond.
Okay.
We have to be aware of what this threat looks like and what they're trying to do to continue to build up their capabilities to threaten our homeland.
I'm going to move on to a different subject, but does the president need to speak out about this development today, do you think?
You know, I'm not going to tell the president how he ought to handle his international affairs. I think, look, he's gotten a long ways down the road already with them just to have two summits. But it's still a matter of we haven't taken any of the sanctions off. We do have to have international cooperation with us. We may very well have to go back to China once again and push them into siding with us a little bit more than what they are right now. It's kind of tough to do when you're in the middle of trade talks and pretty tough negotiations like we are with China and their theft of our intellectual properties right now.
It's all very complicated, to be sure. There is a vote that will come before the Senate next week to block the president's emergency declaration at the border in order to get funding for his border wall. Will you move to block the emergency declaration? Will you vote?
No, I'm going to side with the president on this one. There are a couple of different accounts. Congress has clearly given the executive branch authority, sometimes more authority than what they probably should have. But in this particular case, he's accessing three separate accounts. Two of the three accounts, he wouldn't even need the emergency declaration for in order to access. So he's got access to several $billion. As a matter of fact, $600 million out of a Treasury fund. He's got access to about another $2.5 billion in a fund that he doesn't need to declare an emergency on. But he did declare an emergency, which he has the right to do, and Congress recognizes that, to access finally about $3.6 billion in funds that would otherwise be used for construction of military facilities. That's the one which is in question. But once again, this is a case where Congress has given him the authority to do it with very few strings attached.
One of the
I do think there's a bigger issue here, though, that's going to come about, And that is that within the appropriations process, remember, the House of Representatives is controlled by Democrats. I think the bigger challenge is going to come when the House probably tries to restrict the use of those different categories of funds in the future. I think that's when the real fireworks are going to start.
Democrats have told me they might try to do that going forward. One thing you have said you were concerned about is that future presidents, maybe Democrats, would use this emergency power for different things. Jay Inslee, governor of Washington, who is running for president, the Democratic nomination, told me if President Trump does this with a border wall, if Jay Inslee becomes president, he's not ruling out doing it for climate change.
Right. There's this. See, in 1976, they created this war power. They created this Emergency Act, and right now, when the president does that, that creates this type of a scenario as a possibility in the future. Now, I think that's an area that may very well be revisited as well. Once again, this is Congress delivering to the executive branch these authorities. So rather than simply walking back in right now and saying, "Okay, we've decided in this particular case that we don't like what the president has done," and I actually think there is an emergency when it comes to having 76,000 people trying to get across the border in the last month alone. So I understand the reason why the president's doing it, but if Congress doesn't like that, then Congress should change the law rather than selectively picking this one particular issue.
We're going to talk about those new numbers because they are glaring. The jump, many of those, if not most, are families presenting themselves, so it's not clear to me what a wall would do. I do want to get you on one last question, though. The New York Times put out copies of these checks that Michael Cohen provided to them from President Trump, signed by President Trump. We can see the copies of them here. And it's just interesting that these checks were written to Michael Cohen. Cohen says as reimbursement for hush money payments to Stormy Daniels on certain dates in the presidency, one on a day that the president met with Angela Merkel, another on a day that he hosted senators to talk about tax cuts. I know you care deeply about the tax cuts. Another on a day when he talked to Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel. You know, this is a jarring juxtaposition. The president accused of writing payoffs to porn stars at the same time conducting presidential business. As you look at it, are you okay with all of this?
I think most of us have a concern anytime you have a president who is trying to work through some very personal matters. I honestly think this president loves his family, and I think it has as much to do with trying not to have public discussions about something that is for him, a private matter that he didn't want to have discussed with his family. And I think that's a lot of it. I think that every time I think about this, I think about that particular issue because I think he really does care about his family. I think he loves his family, and I don't think he wanted his family to go through this.
There are people who have testified that part of those payoffs, though, were to influence the election. You do know that that is something that the Southern District of New York has alleged.
I think they'll have to take a hard look at what that is. Right now, we talk about what are considered campaign expenses, legitimate campaign expenses. I'm not going to try to litigate that today.
Senator Mike Rounds, we covered a lot of subjects. I do appreciate you joining us this morning.
You bet. Nice to visit with you, John.